love hospitality, I love food, I love seeing people have a great dining experience. It's so much who I am, and I've done it my whole life, and I'm good at it. And as everybody in the industry knows, when everything goes right, there's no greater feeling.
Welcome back to Dirty Linen. This is Dani Valent with you. And as always, super grateful to you for putting this podcast in your ears. We do not take your time and attention for granted. We are coming to you today from Tinja Farm, Low Family Wine Co. and the Zin House, a beautiful property near Mudgee, which has so many different streams of activity. There are emus out the back, there are cattle out the front, and a beautiful produce garden, as well as all the different vines. We were here about 6 months ago and spoke to many of the people involved in the property. One of those was Kim Currie, and we are back with Kim today. We'll put a link to our previous chat in the show notes because it is a really beautiful, deep conversation. We went to a lot of places, but there are going to be many more places to go chatting 6 months later. Kim, welcome back to Dirty Linen.
Hi, Dani. It's lovely to have you.
It is beautiful to be here sitting in your beautiful restaurant. Do you want to set the scene for us? Where are we at in the season? What are you feeling? What's looming big for you at the moment?
Well, it's autumn, so pumpkins, orange, yellow, red leaves everywhere. In fact, I'm driving the restaurant manager mad by picking things that drop. And I said, no, just let them drop. That's actually part of the statement, is that it's autumn and leaves drop. So it's also an indication of the constant challenge of enjoying nature and maintaining order. So it's quite an interesting analogy for a restaurant, I guess. We are surrounded by pumpkins, the last of some of the florals. Roses seem to have that last burst before the frosts, and in the first frosts where they seem to sense that they're about to go to sleep and give some last bounty of really beautiful blooms. The things that we've been using throughout the summer that we thought we were tired of, like zucchinis and cucumbers, we're now sad to see them go. But obviously that's part of the challenge of having a seasonal restaurant, and the garden being the driver for it, is that you have no choice. Our first frosts are on their way, so we've said goodbye to those things, and the melons. And now we're looking, just as we do with the florals in the restaurant, look around and be guided by what we can find and what's in the season. It's more austere, it's more pared back and challenging. So we're in the process of looking at 100 ways of using pumpkin.
Well, there are quite a few pumpkins as I look around the room. When I was having lunch, I was looking around the restaurant. It's in an old house. It's so beautiful, like it feels so country, so anchored. And I just wondered if you could speak a little bit about how you dress the room, because I appreciate the aesthetics. I feel like a lot of it washes over me. Like I have a feeling when I'm here, and I can't quite pin down all the things that are giving me that feeling. But how do you approach that, like dressing each room, bringing the outside in?
Well, it's a beautifully designed room, so obviously it's flooded with light, and even though it might feel as if the walls are country style white, they're actually quite an intensity of colour, and there was a lot of work done in the colours that were used in the restaurant, even though it looks like a very neutral palette. And then I furnished it with what I had. They were basically my own things and some of my favourite pieces, so that probably lends that very personal feel to it. And I love things that tell a story and that aren't perfect, and that have beauty. So the texture of plates and of furnishings have always been incredibly important, but not things that you could just go to a store and buy. And it's a bit of a rule of mine, because most people you go to a lovely decorating store and you go, oh, I want that and I want that. And I try to tell myself not to go home, look around, have a look in the sheds, see what I can find that has a genuine anchor to where we are. And then more recently, my friend Luke Scaberis, who is at Hill End and is a very renowned artist, has loaned us a collection, and they're not just Luke's works, although there are some beautiful works that Luke has painted here on Tinja, but a whole series. So there are Lloyd Rees, there is Brett Whiteley's, there's some lovely art from a collection of Australian artists who are very special. So that gives it another layer as well.
There are so many streams of focus here, so many different businesses and different aspects to each of those businesses. So I feel like we could take this conversation in so many ways, but I would like to start by talking about hospitality. And, you know, it's been a really tough 6 months for so many people in the industry. You run a different kind of restaurant, you know, on a property that you own. It's regional. You've got the other draw cards to the business with the wine. But, you know, how is it? What's it like running a regional hospitality business at the moment?
We're very pleased we're diverse, and there are so many streams because it's tough. The wine industry, and I don't think a lot of people are actually acknowledging this, but cellar doors, from our discussions with people and our experience, are down about 50%. So you start there and go, wow, what does that mean in dollars to a business, any business? And for our business, that's really substantial. So the way that we've managed that is, again, we're lucky that we're diverse. We've had Jack Brown doing the residency in the restaurant, and that's given a new focus there and interest from another reason for people to come into a regional restaurant with the bakery in town. So we're looking at what we diversify there. There are thousands of solar farm workers in Mudgee. So we're going, what things can we do within our bakery that are attractive to that audience? So we're doing Roman Pizza Mondays and looking at healthier at home type meal packs. Within the cellar door, we've revamped our cellar kitchen and recreated our food store, and lots more of the value-added products from the things coming from our gardens, relishes and jams and preserves, and expanding that offering and looking at what people might take home as well. So when they finished a wine tasting or a meal at Zin, they pop in and take some cheese and lavash and pickles and olive oil, etc. It's something that they can take home. Obviously, we've had to look at staffing because that's been the really critical one. And one of the lessons that David and I have learned is to trust ourselves. We've went through this whole phase where we expanded and we had lots of middle management and people telling us you need to do this and you need to do that, and we're flip-flopping trying to listen to other people's advice, and that constant right throughout my career, you know, you mustn't micromanage. Well, what's saved our bacon in this period of time is that we have actually decided to trust ourselves and to listen to ourselves and to micromanage to some extent and as positively as we can. And we've seen a really interesting response to the staff that we have, that we have less staff as staff have left, and particularly in middle management. And we found that given us quite a lot of pleasure and actually relieved some of the pressure that we used to have, trying to manage all of these people and the inefficiencies around that. And I'm part of a group of women in restaurants called Women in Restaurants. It's called WAR, and that group send each other messages all the time, ask questions, offer support, chat, and it's incredibly useful. That group probably don't know how useful I think it is, because I do a lot of listening and a lot of talking in that group. And somebody said in one of those communications, if I didn't micromanage, I'd be broke. Micromanaging is what has saved me. And that gave me such peace of mind, and also to understand that, yes, micromanaging actually is the difference between us having stayed in business in this period of time and not. And I find that because there are less managers, I'm able to be gentler and have more direct relationships with the people that are here. So we've found it an interesting and challenging period, and to be working this hard and this directly in our business at this age, I mean, we've both been in the industry over 40 years, is challenging. But what we've done is we've given ourselves a couple of days away from the business. We actually physically leave the property. We go to a spot on the river that we love, and David calls it working hard and relaxing hard. So that has been a treasure of an opportunity that we've forced ourselves to do as well. So we feel invigorated, excited, terrified, supported, and much loved. As one of the other things that we've done is, because Zin House has become more and more fine dining over the years and further away from the way that I naturally cook and some of my personal preferences, I always said, we cook simply, we cook from scratch with what we grow. Now, there's not really anything simple about the food that's being prepared here at the moment. And it's pushing boundaries with Jack's native food combinations and the work he's doing. And it's exciting and it's interesting, and people are embracing that. But for me, as a cook, I feel more removed from the restaurant than I have in the past. And I have to find the balance. Like, how do you let young people do their thing and find the balance with giving them, mentoring people, providing wisdom and support, but not pushing the way you want to do it down young people's throats. And I have gone through now not just one but two generations of food movements. So looking back, having perspective and going, wow, this food is not the food I would do, and it's really different. It's delicious, it's exciting, but what do I do now as a cook? So obviously I'm liking doing some recipes, doing a little bit of writing, love the garden and the animals, and there's still 1,000 other things that keep me busy. But we're also doing something called Trust the Chef. So every Saturday for the next 3 months, within the middle of the winery, we're putting a big table and we're just feasting. And that's my way of leaning into the generosity side. We always say generosity, quality, authenticity. They're our base things that we always lean into. But the generosity side of it, when things are this tough, we think is really important. So having people being able to come in and just eat my food from big bowls, strangers sharing food across the tables, it's like the old days at the Ralston food store for me, which was 20 or so years ago now. And it's a way of engaging the locals, visitors, in a really affordable way. So we charge $75, you get 3 courses and you get a glass of wine. But our job now is to get people in, to build affection, and then to sell them something. That sounds really coarse, but obviously that's part of what it's about. And giving people experiences that are affordable across the board. So the difference between being able to have a picnic hamper at Lowe's or a $250 meal with wine at Zin House is now so broad, that difference. What we're looking at is what are other ways that we can introduce people to our business and bring back people that used to come to Zin all the time, but now it is a special occasion restaurant. So accepting that, acknowledging that, and finding other ways to bridge that gap. It's also the reason that we've brought back our farm walks, and we make that free for children. So that's not something it's not a money-making activity, but how do we maintain interest in what we're doing, and awareness and affection, and building affection. And then from that comes, we would hope, then people support us by buying our goods and engaging in our activities, the financial things. And that's pretty much what we also said during COVID, and when after you go through the shit, how we were going to manage, what we're going to do, and we're hospitality people and we can't trade. David and I said to ourselves at that time, everyone comes through this, we will be remembered for what we did and how we looked after our people, how we engaged in our community, how we acted as decent human beings. That will be people's memories. So we just have to kind of shelve this time, suck it up, and remember that those people who don't act honourably in this time are going to pay for that in the long haul.
I'll give you a bit of an insight into what happens in my mind when you're speaking, because I think as much as there are so many strands to what happens here on the farm, I mean, you're expressing all of them, and I can see, like, I suppose, the busyness of, what has to happen for you and for David as you wrangle this business or these businesses. But yeah, all the different conversations that you must have to have, all the different permutations where you're dealing with different people and different seasons. And I think when someone gives a big juicy answer to a question as you have and goes off on a number of tangents, I suppose what I'm thinking as you're talking is, I'll pick up on that, or I'll come back to that, or I'll ask that question next. But then you just come up with something else that needs to be spoken about so urgently and so compellingly. I suppose what I'm saying is that there are so many big issues that you raise. And which one should we go back to? I think what I'll do is ask you about this group of women. Is it important that it's a group of women talking about restaurants? Could it not be a group of people?
It's the age-old question, isn't it? And no, I don't believe it would happen, and particularly in hospitality where men have such a loud voice and are often the people that are the placeholders for opinions. So for women to be able to have these discussions when so many women are driving hospitality businesses and, the men are out the front, as I said, the big voice, it's really important, and there's so much thoughtful wisdom and generosity. And it isn't that men aren't thoughtful or wisdom wise or generous, but in this environment, that's what works. And the bro, chest beating culture of chefs in particular, I actually find quite offensive. And there are so few women, and said that this is a really important place in hospitality for this group of women, and it's not a closed group. And any time somebody finds somebody who they thinks might like to be included in that little WhatsApp group, and people gather in person sometimes as well, but it's just knowing that you can say whatever you like, ask a question, not feel like you're stupid, and have such a broad range of advice from people who are generally not being ego-driven. And I know how that sounds, the comment I'm making on men in hospitality, but, guys, you're going to have to wear it because so much of it is true, and it is a very hard space for women. And as you age, as a woman in hospitality, that becomes even more challenging. And I have to say, it's one of the things I love about working with Jack Brown, is that he's so respectful as a young man of women and age in a kitchen and in the industry. And that isn't something that I have found often.
Something else I'd love to go back to is how tough things are right now. And, you've been doing this for a while. Do you feel like this is just one of those normal cycles of business, or does this feel like something different that's happening?
It's so funny because after COVID, we all thought, is it going to go back to normal? And now we know there's no normal. That's the thing that we're aware of, is that there was the world pre-COVID, there was COVID, then post-COVID when anything went crazy and people were throwing money around, and now people are terrified, and even if they have a job, they don't know if they're going to keep their job, so they're hanging on to their money, and people are scared. And we interviewed a young Italian chef last night, and she said, I'm of this generation where I'm fearful for the world and the environment. So the place I work and the principles of a place are really important to me, and that I can feel in an environment that I've finished her words, but there is no normal, and there's so much fear. And I think for young people that I can't imagine what that's like. So to answer your question, Dani, we just have to keep adapting and being flexible. And it's one of the things that my daughter, who works in our business, can be very critical of us. And she says, I'm just calling it as it is. I'm the one who's brave enough to tell you, what you should be doing or what you're not doing, or to reflect things to you. And I was thinking about it the other day, and I thought, actually, we're very reactive, and that can be really frustrating for people who are working within frameworks and trying to be professional and trying to work through a strategy. We are incredibly frustrating, but it's also why we've survived. And it's because we are so adaptable and because we are able to move quickly. And that's hell for the people around us, because we're already going, okay, but we said we were going to do that, but now we can see that things have changed, so we're going over there, and everybody's still kind of getting to that spot where we said we wanted to start from, and we've moved on to 3 others. So, and we're not always right either. So we recognise that can be really frustrating, but I also think it's part of our success.
Yeah, well, if you can see something and that something needs to change, I suppose that's part of that, stripping out that middle layer, but also trusting yourselves. And I suppose, what does that mean, that you trust yourselves to recover from a mistake as well?
We're also incredibly idealistic and optimistic, and sometimes that bites us in the bum. So, for example, we decided that Zin House is beautiful at lunch. That's when people should come and join us, because you can see out, you can enjoy the gardens, and on top of that, if we were only a lunch venue, then our chefs and our teams, our entire hospitality teams, could have a lovely life where they went home every night and nobody ever had to do a double shift. And we went, that's what a restaurant should be like. We're going for that. Well, it cost us a lot of money and it was not financially viable. Everybody wants to come to Zin House on a Friday and a Saturday night. We do 50% of our business on a Saturday. And the financial reality of that meant that we had to go back initially to doing Saturday nights. Then we had to go back to doing Friday nights. And at that stage, we'd opened a Thursday lunch because we were trying to move to lunches and away from dinners. So now what we're recognising is that makes it really hard for our chefs to get 2 solid days off without coming in and prepping. So we've now said we're going to close Thursday lunch. And again, that's, you're changing, but we're actually adapting, and we would have loved to have just been a lunch venue, but that wasn't what the market responded to.
Yeah. So I'd love to go back to the micromanaging side of things. Can you give people any examples of ways that you've micromanaged and how that's really been beneficial for the business?
I'm sure that some of the staff might disagree, but for example, rosters, right? So it's an incredibly challenging thing when the ups and downs, you have long weekends and public holidays and school holidays, and there are times where, and I'm talking more here about the winery, where it's harder to predict the numbers that are coming in. And during COVID, we trained people to book and to be prepared to pay for the privilege of it. Now people are very much more last-minute booking. So the cellar door in particular has, you can never really predict the numbers. If we didn't stay over those rosters and ask the right questions about, can that person start later? Can that person go home now? Perhaps they've done their hours and there's not anything left for them to do. This seems like small things, but they're the sorts of things that can make the difference. Everybody knows that in hospitality your margins are so slim, and that it's on wages, that you make or break it. So they're conversations that we have to keep having, and ideally you have managers or the people who are in charge of a particular shift getting that, but often people are caught up in their own. They're caught up, particularly if they're great and engaged with people and great hospitality people, they're focused on their customers. They're not necessarily focused on all the other things that are happening around them. So it's very easy to lose those margins, which are the difference between staying in business or making a little bit of money.
I'd love to also ask you, you mentioned, you're idealists. These are very values-driven businesses. Does that rub up against the micromanaging side of things?
It's a really good question. Can you tell me a little bit more about what it is that you're asking?
I don't know. I'm thinking, let's talk about Jack. So we've got Jack Brown. He's a First Nations chef who's here in residence. You know, we hope he'll stay for ages because it's really fun and interesting what he's doing. And he's got a big project, a big plan to highlight Indigenous cooking, Indigenous ingredients, to bring that, really important, vibrant culture to the table, and to, change people's minds, open people's minds and hearts. That's a really big project. So, but at the same time, I don't know, he's the chef in your restaurant and you're running a business. And I mean, I'm not picking on this aspect of it. Maybe there's nothing to say here, but I know you believe, or you should say, what is your vision and what are the values that have driven you to give this opportunity to Jack? And are there things that make it a challenge as well?
It's constantly the balance. So Jack will be given figures. He knows what his food costs are. He knows what his wages are. And so he knows when that might be out of kilter, but he knows that he also has our support to use the best possible produce, to try things that might be a little bit outside of the square. So it's balance. And we are essentially, we are hospitality people, and we want to share a lovely experience. So we're at that end of it. And then you've got the business people who open a restaurant because they might want to sell their wine. I think it's a great way to sell their wine, or bring people onto their venue, or really stupid, they think they might make money out of hospitality in restaurants. So we're realists, and we love the idea of people having a wonderful time. That's the essence of it. So we want to give people a good time. So we're obviously always constantly balancing that with maintaining the business side of it. So we probably spend more money and invest more money than other businesses might in things that are nice to haves, or that make us feel good, or are beautiful. I can't even begin to tell you what our market garden costs. And if we were a business in the traditional sense, there's no way you would run a market garden. It is just such an expensive exercise, so much cheaper to buy things in. That's without even looking at all the extra labour that goes into harvesting and processing, and making sure that there's not a slug in a salad to freak a guest out. So I guess I know it's a wishy-washy answer, but I think that there are people who, the guys who get the superannuation and go, I'd love to run a cafe, and then lose all their money. They're at one extreme. And then the business people who go, I'm driving this, I'm going to use this as an opportunity to pull as much cash out of people as possible. And we're the people in the middle of all of that going, it's got to be beautiful. It has to be generous. It has to feel like it's come from the heart, because it has to have come from the heart. And we've got to keep all these people employed. And we're in our 60s, and we might want to do other things with our lives as well. And we want to protect this property. So they're the things that we balance.
Yeah, it's a lot. We live in a very, always on, always available society. I'd love to explore this idea of the relax hard. How difficult is it for you to carve out that time, and how important is it?
It's always been incredibly difficult, because we're on the property and we live in the old house on the farm, and if we are physically at Tinja, we find it almost impossible to withdraw from the business, or not be absorbed into some sort of daily fixing of something. That's where that micromanaging bites you on the bum. So we actually, the first time David and I ever went away, he rented a beautiful place on the Hawkesbury River, and we started going back and found Barara Waters, which is just down the road from the magnificent Barara Waters Inn, and loved that. Became our kind of go-to spot when we could get away. So we've got a little spot down there that we're renting from some friends. So physically we go virtually every week. We go for at least 2 days, and we remove ourselves, and we're on the river, so I kayak, I fish badly. We joke that we should put a sign on the river that says, we're really bad fishermen, but we're great winemakers, happy to trade. So we read, we do all those things that we would never do at home. We do some work while we're there as well, but we're really good at switching off, and we come back feeling really restored.
So important, because I think burnout is such an issue. You know, people are working, owners, you know, everyone, but owners are working so hard in their businesses and perhaps not able to pay themselves properly. I mean, what sort of stories do you hear from people around that?
It's horrible. It's really, it's never been tougher, so I don't know what I can say that is remotely encouraging, other than, as I had said earlier, we have found our salvation in believing in ourselves and not having so many consultants, virtually no consultants in our business. Those experts that said you must do this, you must do that, all burning platform. We've pulled the good things out of that, and there were many good things, but recognising how big a part of your expenses wages pay, and it bites you all the way along, the superannuation, the payroll, all of the other things that come with employing people, supporting people, and especially if you care about people, because the list of the range of ways that people need to be supported when you employ them and deserve to be is huge. So I think we probably didn't, when we were on our big expansionist thing, realise just how expensive it was to have people, and that's what's cost us. So I think you have to love what you're doing. Otherwise, why would you do it? Why would you work this hard? And I know that lots and lots of people at the moment are confronting that challenge, that if we can't make money, or we're losing money, and we're not even enjoying what we're doing anymore because it's so stressful. So many people are getting to that point where they have to make that choice, and that's breaking the hearts of anyone who's in hospitality, because we all know that, but for the grace of God, and it's challenging. But there's been some people out there, and Dani, you've covered some of these stories, who've been brave enough to call it and say it as it is, and that's helped other people who are in those situations to also call it and know that they're not a failure. That it's not a weakness, and that when you get to that point, do call it, do get out, do go and do something else with your life. Don't feel like you've failed, because there's nothing about the current situation that falls to personal failure. It's just so much happening beyond people's control, and it takes a lot of courage to face that. And I think that some of the work that you've done and some of the interviews you've done and the courage of people who have talked about that honestly has helped other people in that situation.
Yeah, there's such big life choices that people are faced with. And people, we hear stories all the time, that people are dipping into their own personal resources to keep their businesses afloat. I mean, I think there are some things that are within people's control, and you speak about the micromanaging, like having your eye on every single aspect of your business can, steer the ship to some degree. But as you say, there is so much that people can't control, and I think being aware of that and humble about that is also, part of being in business. I mean, what do you love about what you do? Why are you still doing this? What does drive you, Kim?
I just love hospitality. I love food. I love seeing people have a great dining experience. I love the beauty around that juggle. I have been saying this for years, but the bits that I love are the animals in the garden, and I'm at my happiest if I stumble into the staff room and the garden team are all talking about what they're doing in the biodynamics, or what's happened with how healthy the citrus orchard is, and the various challenges. Even in 40 years in, I'm still trying to struggle to find that balance, and I guess it's so much who I am, and I've done it my whole life, and I'm good at it. And as everybody in the industry knows, when everything goes right, there's no greater feeling.
So we've been talking, having this another juicy chat, and the fog's burnt off. I can feel the sun on my back as we sit in this beautiful dining room. If we walked around the property today, what are some of the things that we would see?
Kesh has got the biodynamic. I've forgotten the term.
Potion?
I don't know. They look like big toilet bowls. They're so she's got all her potions happening, and the biodynamic things are doing. They're tumbling and looking very witchy. The leaves are falling from the vineyard, which the Zin House is named after, that Zinfandel block there, our block 9, and looking really stark in contrast to the layers of hills that are flowing behind it, and the evergreen of the gums and the ironbarks behind that. The olive trees have got that lovely grey that's reflected by the artichokes are starting to come through. There are jonquils starting, so that very much feeling that winter is upon us, but those lovely warm days you get at this time of year in inland and places like Mudgee, where you know that you're going to cozy up tonight with a fire, but you're going to be stripped down to a t-shirt during the day and sunbathe. When I say sunbathe, bathe in the rays of the sun. The sheep and the cattle and the as you said, as the Dinawan, the emus are playing in the back with the rams. I don't think there's and the chooks are making a mess and scrambling around the scraps that I took up there this morning. It really looks all very peaceful and not very rushed, which is kind of funny when you consider that tomorrow the whole place is going to go crazy again.
Oh, beautiful. You paint a beautiful picture and you create a beautiful space for people to enjoy and find their own pleasures and connection to the seasons and the environment. So thanks, Kim, for steering us through another beautiful conversation.
It's a pleasure. Thank you, Dani.
This is Dirty Linen, and I'm Dani Valent. We air the issues that the hospitality industry finds hard to talk about, hearing from different people with unique perspectives. We want to hear from you as well. If you have something that needs to be said about a topic, get in touch so we can include your perspective. Contact us at dirtylinenat deepintheweeds.com.au or hit us up on Insta at Dirty Linen Podcast. We can't wait to hear from you.